Now, Israelis are out on streets queuing up again. Fifth time in just 4 years, the government has collapsed in the country. So it's a new election, but with old issues. There are 4 key players here. Benjamin Netanyahu, who is trying to make a comeback. Prime Minister Yair Lapid, who is seeking a re-election. Current Defense Minister Benny Gantz, who is eyeing the top seat. And Itamar Ben-Gvir, a far-right leader targeting his niche base. All eyes are mostly on Netanyahu. He has served as the Prime Minister longer than anyone else in Israel's history. He is in the middle of many corruption cases, but that might not affect his popularity. Netanyahu will most certainly be the largest party in the Knesset this time. They will probably win about 30 seats, which is a quarter of the total. He has vowed to expel leaders who are disloyal to the country. Now, giving a tough fight to Netanyahu is current Prime Minister Yair Lapid. His last time's ally, Naftali Bennett, is not running this time. So Lapid is at a desperate disadvantage. His calculations are hanging by a thread. Even a slight drop in turnout would be enough to push him out of the Knesset. It is important to understand that Israel has a parliamentary system made up of many parties, none of which have ever received enough votes on their own to secure a majority. A similar scene is going to play out this time. What it means is that parties will have to team up to form the government. And with coalitions comes differences. To form a government, Netanyahu or even Lapid, both will have to seek help. And this is why the smaller parties tend to become the kingmakers. 61 seats are needed to head the country.
הבחירות האלה הן בין העתיד לבין העבר. אז תלכו היום להצביע בשביל העתיד של הילדים שלנו, בשביל העתיד של המדינה שלנו. תצביעו טוב, שיהיה בהצלחה לכולם. תודה רבה.
Now, it is a debut for Defense Minister Benny Gantz. With the new National Unity Party, he is aiming for a strong showing. Netanyahu has already vowed to not partner with Gantz. Religious Zionist Party is eyeing for a coalition to sit on the ruling side. Experts say it could be the largest extreme right-wing group ever seated in Israel's parliament. Security and surging prices have topped the list of voter concerns. However, the voters are exhausted, and this could hurt today's turnout. In fact, reports say that it is expected to be historically low. Voters say that the election have become like rolling the same dice again and again. The same few leaders keep contesting on the same issues they were fighting 4 years back. Decades-old issues with Palestinians is a common topic of flare-up. 3 Palestinian blocs are also running, but the future looks dark for them. The parties are unlikely to garner enough votes to pass the threshold required to enter the parliament. Last election was the first time an Arab party was part of the ruling government. This year, it looks uncertain. Now, for more on this, we are being joined by correspondent Jodie Cohen from Ra'anana. Welcome to the broadcast, Jodie. Let's start with Benjamin Netanyahu. In the last election, his party won the most number of seats, yet he failed to form the government. How are his prospects looking this year?
Right, so his strategy throughout this whole campaign has been 1 + 1 = 4. That's if every Likud voter brings out a Likud supporter who stayed at home last time, perhaps because of voter fatigue or just not expecting to see any change in the election results. He's saying that that could lead to a 4-year solid rule of a Likud-led coalition government. However, he's also in the last few days been encouraging the ultra-Orthodox voters to go out and vote. Now, he knows that they're not going to vote for him. They're going to vote most likely for the ultra-Orthodox parties. But that doesn't matter to him in terms of the bigger picture, in terms of the coalition building. It's just important for him that the people who are likely to vote for the right-wing religious parties go out to vote and to get the voter turnout up, because he thinks that will increase his chances of forming a coalition government. And he does have a chance. Saying that, the polls, and we all know that polls don't always get it right, but the polls are predicting he'll be able to pull together a coalition of 60, not the magic number of 61 that is needed. We know also that Yesh Atid has been out campaigning with a similar strategy, trying to get their voters out, but also voters out for the left-wing coalition, centrist coalition, and also trying to get the Arab Israeli community out to vote to increase their voter turnout as well, in a bid to not necessarily realistically get 61 seats, although I don't think they would publicly say that. But really, the key strategy on the Yesh Atid side is just to stay in power, even if it means another election, but for Yair Lapid to continue as the interim prime minister. And then their hope is that perhaps Likud would then, seeing that Netanyahu wouldn't be able to, in this scenario, form a coalition government again, that their hope is that they would then change Likud's leader, and that then there could be a Likud Yesh Atid national unity government going forwards in a future election. But it remains to be seen if that's one of a number of scenarios that could happen.
Absolutely. Now, we are also tracking the opinion polls ourselves, but as you mentioned, it is extremely difficult to get it right in Israel. Shifting our focus a little here, looking at the developments in Israel, everyone has one question, Jodie. Why is no government able to sustain in Israel?
So I think that is, it's a victim of the political system here, which, as you said, is proportional representation. And that means that, you know, the two largest parties are Likud and Yesh Atid. They are not big enough to be able to form they have to go into a coalition with another government. And what that means is that the smaller parties, they can represent their niche sections of the community, their niche interests. They're almost like interest groups, if you like. And so they can go into a coalition, and then if the smaller parties feel that their voices aren't being heard in a coalition government, that they can simply pull the plug on it, as what happened in the last election under Prime Minister Bennett after only a year, and that's why we're now heading to elections again. So it really is the system here. We've seen polarization across the world. Some might say it's a victim of the increasing polarization as well. But it remains to be seen if this election would produce a conclusive result. But it's not likely, I think, for that to happen. There's definitely going to be a coalition. There could be weeks of protracted negotiations on building a coalition government here.
Now, talking about niche, Palestinians say that they are not well represented in the parliament, and it is unlikely that their bloc will be eligible for the threshold even this time. So how do you think that the Palestinians will receive this time's election result?
So I think it's very important to differentiate between Palestinians who get to vote in Palestinian Authority elections, although they haven't had a chance to vote because the Palestinian Authority has cancelled any planned elections over the past several years, and to differentiate them between Arab Israelis who live within Israel. Now, some of them identify as Palestinians, but the majority, according to polls, actually identify as Israelis. So I think that's really important to differentiate there. Now, Arab Israelis get a vote in, of course, in the Israeli elections. They have the opportunity to vote for any party that they would like. There are, as we said, we were talking about these niche, smaller interest group parties. So there have been 4 parties that say that they represent the Arab Israeli communities. And in the past, they have run together under what's called the Joint List. They've even been the 3rd largest party in Israel in previous elections. However, in these elections, they've decided to split up, and they're running under 3 parties. So you've got the Balad party, which is seen as the Palestinian nationalist party, and they're not expected to cross the threshold. They're not seen, it seems, to represent the Arab Israeli community enough here. Then you've got Hadash Tal, which are also non-Zionist. They are mixed in terms of Palestinian nationalism and supporting a 2-state solution. They have actually, interestingly, appealed to far left Jewish voters, Jewish Israeli voters here, to vote for them in order to get them over the threshold. But it remains to be seen if that will happen. And then you've got the Ram Party, who actually made history and entered the coalition government under the last government. So they are expected to pass the threshold here. And so there will be representation for the people who vote for them. And then it's also interesting that Yesh Atid has really gone out of its way to set up 32 groups across Arab Israeli communities across the country to try and target and to bring out the Arab Israeli voters So they will be hoping to attract some votes as well from that community, but more with an attempt to just raise the level of participation in these elections. And that really could influence the outcome of the elections.
All right. Thank you for all those insights, Jodie. We will be coming back to you for the latest.
Thank you.